So we've been plugging this week about one of our favorite stories from World War II, at least favorite heroes from World War II, is a guy named Dwight Eisenhower. Now, Dwight is noted for having been a president, certainly the commander of the Allied forces, but his story is so cool backing up to when he was just a kid. He was born as a Texan, which, yay, Texans.
Good guys. That's
the reason
Best
probably...
nation on earth.
Yeah, between the blessing of God and being born a Texan, right? That's how he accomplished so much.
It's interesting. Kansas claimed he was born in Denison in 1890, but when you go to the U.S. Capitol, every state gets to have two statues there, and Kansas has a statue of this guy. They claim it.
I mean, he did grow up in Kansas.
He grew up in Kansas. Now, I will say the only home he really ever owned is in Pennsylvania at Gettysburg Battlefield. So you could have three states claim it, but Texas gets first shot.
And when his family moved to Kansas, they had a farm in Kansas. And just like a normal kid growing up on a farm in Kansas, he actually played sports. He said he loved football. Football was one of his favorite things. He lived for sports. But growing up on the farm, one day he's running the farm. He fell down. He scraped his leg. And that's pretty common for a boy to fall down and scrape their knee, right? You get up, you shake it off. It's no big deal. The difference is, back in early America, this is the early 1900s, is when all this is unfolding for his life. And at that time, there's not a Neosporin, right? There's not the antiseptics, antibiotics that you would use to clean out a scrape. And so if a scrape got infected, if a cut got infected, it could be lethal. Well, his scraped knee got infected. In fact, on Sunday when the family was going to go to church, Dwight told his mom, I don't feel good at all. And his family was a very religious family. They were a very devout family. And so every Sunday they were going to church. But he told his mom, I don't feel very good today. So mom said, okay, well, stay home. We'll check on you when we get back. The reports say...
And it was when we get back tonight, which means they went to church all day long.
Yeah, the reports say when they got back that night, they checked on him, right? And so we don't know necessarily maybe how far it was, maybe the picnic on the way, but they get back that night. And when they get back that night to check on him, Dwight is running a fever. He's having delirium, coming in and out of consciousness. And so mom goes up, finds him, screams. Dad comes running in. She says, get the doctor now. So he goes to town, get the doctor. Doc Conklin came back to check on him. And when Doc Conklin got there, he instantly realized there's a problem. And Dwight at the time had been relatively dressed. And so he says, okay, well, let's undress him. Let's see if we can find out what's going on with his body. They try to undress him, and taking his boot off, his foot was so swollen from that scrape on his knee. It had gone up his leg, down his leg. His leg was swollen. They had to cut his boot off. They had to cut his pant leg off. And they looked at this cut on his knee, and it was purple and it was black, and the black and purple was going up his thigh into his body. So Doc Conklin has this crazy idea that the only way to save his life is if we amputate the leg, because we have to stop the infection before it reaches the body. If it reaches the body, it's going to kill him. So the best hope we have is to take his leg.
So Doc Conklin goes downstairs. He gets in his horse and buggy, goes back to the office, literally to get a saw to come back and take off the leg. And Dwight has heard this conversation, and no young boy, at this point he's 12 years old, no young boy ever wants to lose a leg, but Dwight, athlete, he sure didn't. And so he calls his older brother Edgar in, and a lot of this account comes from the mother recounting the story later. Edgar comes in, and it's, you can imagine how it goes. Dwight's not happy about this, but Edgar, whatever happens, make sure that you don't let him take my leg off. And so they go back and forth, and you can imagine Edgar saying, well, hey, Dwight, they got to save your life, man. It's important you be alive. Don't let him take my leg off. And so it goes back and forth. So when Doc Conklin comes back, going upstairs to take off the leg, Edgar gets kind of in the way and blocks the door and says,
oh my gosh,
sorry, Doc, you can't go in. I got to save your brother's life. Yeah, sorry, Doc, you can't go in. Hey, look, if I don't get in there and take that leg off, he's going to die. And I'm sorry, Doc. Edgar, you're going to be the cause of your brother's death if you don't get out of my way. And so literally at that point, they get frustrated. The doctor goes back downstairs because Edgar won't let him go in. As he goes downstairs, as he's going out the front door, and angry shouts over his shoulder, said, the only thing that will save that boy's life is a miracle. Yeah, well, Dwight ends up being alive, so must have had a miracle somewhere along the way. What happens is that the other brothers, he's got 5 other brothers, his mom, Ida, and his father, David, and they really do put a lot of focus on prayer. And within a few days, they start seeing real improvement and start seeing change. And so, you know, as it ends up.
And that's when he was 13 years old.
13.
So he's 13 years old when this happens. And what happened is.
I said 12, so 13.
Yeah, they had daily prayer already. The family every morning and every night would pray. And so the family just said, hey, let's make sure we're praying for Dwight. And so every morning they would pray for Dwight. Every evening they prayed for Dwight. And after a week or two, they called Doc Conklin. He comes and looks and says, the leg's better. I don't know how to explain it. And Dwight says, the only thing I want to do is get back and play football because he loves sports. And his parents said, let's just wait. Let's hold you out the rest of this semester, right? Let's just let the year go on. So he lost a year. Well, school didn't last as long back then as it did now until he gets out earlier. Brother wants to go to the military, actually wants to go to college specifically. And
his brother Edgar, who did so much for him.
Arguably saved his leg.
Yeah.
And so Dwight says, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to work, I'm going to help put you through through college. Dwight goes to the military. He's going to put his brother through college. And so Dwight works to get his brother through college. His brother goes through college. Dwight says, now I want to go, but Dwight really wanted to go to the military. And so Dwight applies to go to the military.
And specifically, he wanted to go, as a Kansas boy, he wants to go to the Naval Academy. I'm not sure there's that much water in Kansas to know what the Naval Academy is.
Probably why he wanted to go to the Naval Academy, right? Let's get out of this cornfield and go see some water. So he applies for the Naval Academy, and they say, you're too old to be accepted. And so he's very disappointed. He says, okay, well, what can I do? Found out he could be accepted into the Army Academy. He could go to West Point. So he got accepted to go to West Point, and this is where his military career begins to take off. And a lot of people today know him as a military person, but he never could have made it had it not been for, right, God saving his leg, saving his life, perhaps even in the midst of that amputation gone wrong, he loses his life. It's a really cool unfolding of the story.
Think of the downstream effects. If you did not have Dwight Eisenhower running D-Day and in Europe, because Dwight's in charge of all of Europe, you might have had a real different outcome for things how it turned out. It might have been a lot longer in the war. His innovative ideas that he used, had he lost that leg, there's no chance of going to the military. There's no chance of being there. It's like God needed him here and performed really an intervention back here to do it.
And obviously, Dwight had a long military career. There's so much you can study about his military career, obviously, with some of the D-Day strategy, D-Day invasion, with him being the commander of the Allied forces. There's a lot of details which we're going to have to skip through to get to a few of the major parts we want to cover, but there is a cool book giving some of that.
This right here is one of Dwight Eisenhower's books that he wrote. He actually did a lot of memoir writing afterwards. This one is specifically talking about the Crusade in Europe, which even that name Crusade probably comes from his close association with Billy Graham actually after the war, which is kind of interesting. I was just doing some reading on that after he meets Billy Graham as president, he starts using a lot of Billy's lingo in the things that he's doing, and actually that's one of the things that he kind of draws from. But what's fun about this as well is you've also got right here the speech before going into D-Day. This is actually signed by him, and you actually see, right, he calls it the Great Crusade as well, even back then. But really great speech. I would highly encourage this if you want to know more specifically about the military operations in Europe, because we've had to cover so little of it. There's so much there. I'd read it from him, right? This is a primary source from the guy in charge. Really cool books as well. And then after the war, he goes back to America. Right?
Yeah, so he eventually, right, does run for office. At the time when he runs for office, it's kind of funny. People don't know what political side he's going to take because he hasn't really been politically affiliated. It almost was like Donald Trump when Hillary Clinton once said he should run for office one day, having no idea he would run against her one day, right? Well, Dwight Eisenhower not declared a political position, so Democrats and Republicans were both saying, run for us, run for us. He finally ran on the Republican ticket. He does get elected to be president, and he is friends with Billy Graham, and that influence does reveal itself in several things he did as president. And one of the things that he acknowledged even leading up to the presidency is he wanted to help people remember who God was. And in helping them remember God, because it's not unusual at the end of conflicts, at the end of war, when there's been a lot of death, that there's some darkness that people are having to go through and figure out and navigating these new things. And he wanted to help people remember who God was. So before his even inauguration ceremony, they had a church service. And it was pretty public that he was doing a church service. And then at his own inauguration, he is sworn in on 2 Bibles. The first one is the Bible that was there used for presidents, but he also had the Bible that his mom gave him when he went to West Point. So he puts his hand on 2 Bibles to be sworn in. And then after he's sworn in, he says, there's something else I want to do. He says, I want to say a little prayer, and I ask everybody to join me.
My friends, before I begin the expression of those thoughts that I deem appropriate to this moment, would you permit me the privilege of uttering a little private prayer of my own? And I ask that you bow your heads. Almighty God, as we stand here at this moment, my future associates in the executive branch of government, join me in beseeching that thou wilt make full and complete our dedication to the service of the people in this throng and their fellow citizens everywhere. Give us, we pray, the power to discern clearly right from wrong, and allow all our words and actions to be governed thereby and by the laws of this land. Especially we pray that our concern shall be for all the people, regardless of station, race, or calling. May cooperation be permitted and be the mutual aim of those who, under the concepts of our Constitution, hold to differing political faiths, so that all may work for the good of our beloved country and thy glory. Amen.
This right here that we have is the actual handwritten prayer from Dwight Eisenhower that he is reading from at his inauguration. Again, you can look it up online, look it up on YouTube, find the video. You will see him pull this out. And what's really interesting about it, too, is on the back of it, you can see this is actually the hotel stationery from where he was staying. So he pulls this out, writes it down, and then stands up.
Dwight wrote this down and said, I was really struggling with how to keep America from becoming so secular. I'm not a preacher like Billy Graham. I can't give a sermon. What can I do? I can pray a prayer. And so while he was at the hotel, the night before inauguration, he wrote this prayer out. And that is the actual prayer, and it went across the country. Insurance companies started printing it and distributing it to their clients. This is actually, savings bonds is the way we funded the government back then. And so if you bought a savings bond, if you bought a big enough one, they actually gave you this prayer of Eisenhower. And it was framed with wood from the platform on which Eisenhower was sworn in. So, I mean, the prayer really did go across the nation.
And this was part of his effort. There were several things he did as president to try to help people remember God. One of the cool things that he did, he's the one that helped get under God put in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yep.
And the reason is he actually was going to a church service and heard a pastor preach a sermon about it.
Yeah, he was going, I think it was New York Street Presbyterian Church. The pastor was Reverend George Dockery, who had just come to America from Scotland. And he wasn't real familiar with American customs. And Dockery, you can go on the website. We've actually got the copy of his sermon there with all of his handwritten notes. But Dockery said, my kids came home from school this week, and I asked them, what'd you guys do at school? And they said, same thing we always do. Well, I don't know what you do in American schools. What do you do? He said, well, we had a prayer. We said the pledge. You said the what? We said the pledge. What's the pledge? What's the pledge to the American flag? The Americans have a pledge to the flag? Yeah, what is it? And they recited the pledge.
Except the reciting was, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And when he heard that, he thought, now, wait a second. America is supposed to be a religious place, right? This is supposed to be a God-centered, not like communism, right? Not like maybe what became the Soviet Union, some of these socialist nations.
Yeah, he said this prayer would work as good for the Soviets as it would for anybody else, because they all say they're one republic.
So he said what makes America different is recognizing God. So he delivered a sermon called Under God. And in this sermon, he says that we should never pledge allegiance to a flag, to a nation, to anything if it's not submitted to God. So his proposal was we should put under God in the pledge. Well, Dwight Eisenhower was there in church listening to this sermon. So after church, Dwight gets with some other political leaders and say, guys, we should put under God in the pledge, which they do. He signed it into law. And he continues this journey of other religious promotions as president.
He also is the one who gets "In God We Trust" added to all currency. And let's also start first Thursday of every year in February. Let's start a congressional prayer breakfast. And let's get a prayer chapel installed over at the U.S. Capitol. I mean, all these things happened under Eisenhower.
And some of this, again, was because of the influence of Billy Graham. At least historians today look at it and credit Billy Graham with some of that influence with helping Dwight remember the importance of God. And Dwight had acknowledged, I want America to remember who God is. And he's a guy that really helped bring a lot of the recognition of God and public life back to America. Again, there's so much more to the story. Much more. And we actually even have some cool artifacts.
Yeah, this is a speech of his to Congress, State of the Union from 1957. Obviously, you can go online. We don't have time to read it. It's 17 pages, but Eisenhower, one of those amazing men in America's history, who would it not be for the prayer that he had as a child, right? His brother standing up for it, his leg. He wouldn't have gotten into the military, he wouldn't have been this. So a guy who gave his life to God and reflected that in his public service. So another really important person that we don't hear about today. But another day, another week, we are praying for you guys, hoping that y'all are staying safe, staying healthy. Our prayers always out for y'all. If y'all have questions, drop them in the comment box. Share this video with your friends, families, and we hope y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you back on Monday.